Welcome to the Virtual Power Teams podcast, now with AI. And today we have a very exciting guest, Radhika Dutt. She joins us from, you tell us, somewhere in the USA.
In Boston.
In Boston, okay, it's a small, tiny city. And she's an author of the book Radical Product Thinking. Did I get it right?
That's exactly right.
Yes. So she would share lots of insights on, the product, and currently AI stepping into the product space and the mindset, that leaders and managers need to step into that. But without any further ado, Radhika, please tell us with your own words who you are and what you do.
So my background is that I'm an engineer by training. I went to MIT for electrical engineering. And then my background since has been I have started companies right out of our dorm room. That sounds glamorous, but really it wasn't, because we made so many mistakes. And so Radical Product Thinking is the first book I wrote, really based on all of those mistakes that I'd made, what I now call product diseases that are just so easy to catch. And those product diseases, examples include, pivotitis, obsessive sales disorder, there's strategic swelling. We can talk about a lot of diseases that are common, just as common, as they were 20 years ago. Still, I see them today. So that was Radical Product Thinking. And what I'm working on now is my next book, which is about why goals and targets don't work, and what actually works instead. And which is also based on the next chapter of my experiences as I've worked with companies all the way from startups to multinationals, even government agencies.
Okay. Tell us, before we deep dive, and I love these diseases, I hope you have some healing as well and some pills, and I'm sure you do. But tell us, what was this decisive moment when you decided to become what you are today? You were initially an entrepreneur, so how did it happen? And maybe when was the moment when you said, I'll be an author, I'll speak on a big stage, but maybe there was something in between. So tell us, please.
It was really never a journey that I planned to be an author or a speaker. Um, I had been working at companies, and I guess the one thing I'll say is that every job that I'd ever had, I had never held two consecutive jobs in the same industry. So every single job was in a different industry. I moved from broadcast, media and entertainment to telecom, robotics, advertising technology, right? And at some point, there was a recruiter who said to me, you should consider focusing. Highly overrated, I'll say. And even my roles were very diverse. So I studied engineering, as I mentioned, but the startup that I first worked on, my role was in sales. Then I've held jobs in program management, in strategy, in marketing. So even the roles were diverse. So how did this all come together to building products? And the answer to that is, there was a mentor very early on who said to me about sales. She said, sales is a life skill. Whether you are interviewing for a job or you're trying to get out of a parking ticket, what your life skill that you need to know is sales. How do you sell yourself? And to me, what I've learned through this whole pattern of working in different organizations, but also sizes of companies, and all of these industries, is that thinking about product is a life skill. Why do I say that? It's because to me, a product is not just a physical or digital thing. It's your mechanism for creating the change you want to bring to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it that way, anything is your product. Like, for instance, a government policy is a product to be able to bring about a certain change in the market. Parenting becomes a product because that's the change you want to create in the world through your kids. Research is a product. Like, everything you're doing at that point, you can start to engineer the change that you want to bring about through your product. And that's when I realized that I really needed to write a book, because this way of thinking is different, and we can very systematically engineer the change we want to bring. Not just, let's just throw things in the market and see what sticks, which is what Silicon Valley says.
Yes. Fantastic. And do you remember when was the moment when you said, okay, now product is my common denominator. Product will be the thing that I will kind of rip apart. And was there any particular point in time?
It was a startup that I had in 2011 and sold in 2014. It was a wine startup, and I was the CEO of this wine startup. And I realized that, I really enjoyed building products. And it was after that, like all the mistakes that I made in that, that made me realize, okay, I know I can do better. And that's what led me to build the next product. And I had a really good partner on the engineering side. And that was an ad tech that I built the product, and the company was acquired for the product that I had built. And it was that moment where I realized there is a better systematic way of translating vision into everyday actions. And that's what made me realize, okay, product is the way, and writing a book and sharing the systematic process.
Excellent. Okay, give us a flavor a little bit of your methodology. Walter, you mentioned a few diseases. Maybe if you could focus on one or two diseases and the healing, just to get a flavor.
Yeah. So these diseases that I mentioned, one of the things I've realized is whenever there's a break in the chain, going from vision all the way into everyday actions, when your everyday actions basically are disconnected from the vision, that's where these product diseases creep in. So I'll give you a few examples. Let's look at the disease pivotitis. Right? That happens when we are just wildly swinging between one shiny idea to the next. And for the team, it feels like whiplash. And in Silicon Valley, you keep hearing, oh, you just keep pivoting and iterating until you find product market fit. In reality, you have 2 to 3 pivots until you run out of money or momentum. So I'm not saying that you never pivot, but you have to pivot with gravitas. So how do you do that? In the radical product thinking way, you have to have a clear vision, because when you don't have that clear vision, you keep swinging from one idea to the next. So here's an example of a really clear vision written in the radical product thinking approach. So it's a fill in the blank statement. So here's how it would go for my wine startup. Today, when amateur wine drinkers want to find wines that they're likely to like and learn about wine along the way, they have to find attractive looking wine labels or find wines that are on sale. This is unacceptable because it leads to so many disappointments, and it's hard to learn about wine in this way by picking random bottles. We envision a world where finding wines you like is as easy as finding movies you like on Netflix, and you can explore wines in this way. We're bringing about this world through a recommendations algorithm that matches wines to your taste and an operational setup that delivers these wines to your door. Now, the cool thing about this vision is I hadn't told you anything about that startup. All I said was it's in the wine space. But hopefully after hearing this vision, you knew exactly what we were doing and why we were doing it. And now to avoid the disease pivotitis, right? When you have a vision that's so detailed, as you start trying this out in the market, you might discover, you know what? Well, the answer to this part of our vision, it turns out to be incorrect. Like the market is telling us that doesn't work. So now I would go back to that vision and say, oh, we were wrong here. This is what we have learned, and here's what we'll try instead. So you pivot, but with gravitas. And this is how you avoid pivotitis.
Yes. Excellent. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about purpose and vision, which are a little bit, they have some similarities. And start with why, Simon Sinek. And I like gravitas, by virtual power teams, it's all about gravity towards the team purpose and goal. So you have the team members like particles in an atom model, pulled by the nucleus, and nucleus is not the manager or project manager, is the team purpose and goal. So that resonates very strongly with me. Maybe give us, I would like to deep dive in this mindset. You say it's a new mindset required in order to radically drive a product. And now AI is the elephant in almost any room. And particularly in product, the market for education, some people position like AI manager certification with trainings, but most of it position AI product manager. It looks like the AI will be revolutionizing above all the product space. And another thing I'll drop in, and then I will be happy to get your views. There's been this from fixed mindset, which is the words, towards like open mindset, you're open for feedback, to growth mindset. There was a famous book about, you know, it's not my talent, but my effort, and, you know, I can grow, and difficulties are challenges for growth. And then the creator mindset in the age of AI, where AI, if you're curious enough, you can create new things. If you experiment and so on, it's an amazing thinking partner and strategist on our side to do beautiful things. And maybe product is one of the biggest opportunities. So how do you see, how is the mindset evolving from your perspective? And then how is AI reshaping the space? These are two questions you could address as you prefer.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack in what you said. Let's start with AI and the biggest danger that I see. You're right, I see this whole mindset of moving towards, oh, we can so quickly create so many things. The danger with that is, just like right now, when you are on the internet and you read content and you can instantly tell, this content is AI generated. It's always a bunch of, you know, bullshit statements that you read. It's all fluff, no little substance, and the kind of writing that just makes me cringe. You know, it's just you can tell AI content slop right away. But to me, I can also tell AI product slop. What do I mean by AI product slop? The way I define it is it's the quickly generated AI products, right? Whether it's through vibe coding, but also UI created by AI, it's the content written up by AI. We can very quickly generate products and throw them out there. But the problem with this creator mindset is, just because you can create doesn't mean you should. You know, I really take issue with the Silicon Valley mindset, where Mark Andreessen, the way he talks about all the solutions of to the world's problems is, let's just build and everything will be better. That's not how things have panned out. Just building doesn't make the world better when we don't put thought behind it, right? This is where the reason I like to talk about product diseases is because there is a doctor's mindset when we build products. You know, when we build products, we say to the world, I see here's a problem and I'm prescribing my solution for this. You know, and that doctor's mindset is that I am taking responsibility for the change that I'm creating in the world. If I prescribe this pill to you, I don't then say, oh, well, whatever happens to you after you use this, good luck and God bless, you know. I take responsibility for the well-being of those users, of what happens to society once I've put that product out. This is the kind of mindset that doesn't exist today. It's the builder's mindset without the responsibility. So the change that I think that is desperately needed with AI is not just a builder's mindset, but a builder's mindset that is more like a Jedi mindset that is reflection-based discipline. It's not stormtroopers that are just shooting wildly and, you know, just lots of activity, building lots, but, you know, missing everything that actually matters. It's the Jedi mindset where you're really thoughtful, disciplined, you experiment, you sense, learn, adapt. And that is a different mindset. So we can do this, and we should not abdicate our approach to reflection, experimentation, learning, adaptation. Don't abdicate that to AI, because we're going to produce AI product slop otherwise, which the definition of AI product slop is the quickly generated, really sloppy, bad AI products that are going to optimize metrics in the short term, but in the long term, create user fatigue and bad consequences for society.
Mm-hmm. I love the spin about responsibility, you know, responsible for the change we create in this world. On the other hand, I'm not sure what would be your take, but many people really now, you can create and vibe code many things, and many people do it. And this is not adding any value, and as you said, may create confusion and even some chaos. But on the other hand, I believe the AI augmenting the product development with all the purpose you describe and the vision and pivoting around the gravitative vision, Then my question would be, if you are willing to share, if you are experimenting at all, how can you augment having already a strong vision for a product and taking responsibility, which I love the Jedi thinking metaphor. How can you use AI for product development? What can you kind of maybe help you to be more creative, generating new ideas, doing faster, prototyping, whatever, if you have experience in this space?
Yeah. So, when you have this clarity of vision, the way I talked about that, right? Don't abdicate that vision and strategy to AI. So first of all, start with this clarity of a direction, not just starting to tell AI what to build. First, grounding your clarity in terms of whose pain am I setting out to solve? What is that? How do they work today? Understanding that puzzle of how do they work today? What is their problem at hand? Why is the status quo absolutely unacceptable? Don't just disrupt for the sake of it. So once you have all of that sense of and the understanding of why you're going to build this product, then you can start using AI. The way I use it is, if you must use AI for design, one of the things to note is AI is very often great at creating user interfaces that look good but are not as functional. Functionally, they actually often create high cognitive load. So before you just launch into solutions, make sure that you've done a lot of exploratory questions to understand the mental models that your users have. Like, how do they think? How do they work? Then when you build a UI prototype, for example, do some user testing in the sense that, there's this tendency recently to use AI generated personas, etc., to ask questions. Don't do that. Like, that is one way of not using AI. It's not helpful. Find real people to first ask your exploratory questions of, and then do user testing with for your prototypes. That's not a good place to use AI. A good place to use AI is when you are generating prototypes. It is, you can start with, UI ideally created by a designer, and then you work back and forth with AI to see, are there other ideas that AI generates? AI is not good at generating things from scratch, but it can give you other suggestions, and then you might look at those ideas and be inspired by other things. But again, it's not great at creativity. So don't rely on that, right? But it will give you speed. So for example, if you have ideas for a UI, then using AI to either vibe code, etc., to create clickable prototypes that you can test with users, that is a great way to accelerate your product development process, the discovery process. So using AI to generate quick prototypes that you can test with users. And then finally, of course, there's vibe coding, both in terms of prototypes, but even in terms of building. One last thing I'll say is, if you're a product manager and you've vibe coded things, it's a really bad idea to then go to your developers and say, well, I just vibe coded this in like 2 days. Why does it take you 2 weeks to put it into code? Well, you didn't have to write the back end, and you don't know how well your vibe coded app, how buggy it is or not. You haven't tested it all out. So just the empathy that, and realistic expectations. I think those are maybe the key learnings in terms of using AI effectively. Don't let it erode team culture, right? In terms of just having these unrealistic expectations, but it is great to push the team too.
Excellent. By the way, you mentioned again the vision and the why. And one of the things I'm doing, and I've seen it also recommended, whenever I do a bigger kind of piece of work with AI, I would not just say what I need, but also why I need it, as you said. I would describe with as much detail why. What is if you wish, the change I want to achieve, what is the underlying purpose behind? It helps. I know AI is learning, it's not there yet, but giving it's part of the contents we provide, and why is like on the higher level of abstraction, but it helps to kind of refer to it.
I love what you said, by the way. And so, and that's a really important point. And continuously sharing that why, even as you make small tweaks, being able to share this why, to have it understand why you're asking for those tweaks, right? But there's one additional point. This why is also important as you do user testing, incorporating learnings. What do I mean by that? Like one thing AI is really good at is optimizing short-term metrics. User engagement is one such example. It might generate UI that optimizes for user engagement. You tell it you want to optimize for clicks, engagement, etc. It'll create a UI that does that. One thing it doesn't necessarily know about, or it won't even know to think about, is the longer term effects that this UI is going to create. Dating apps is a great example, right? Dating apps optimize for short-term metrics like user engagement. The swipe left, swipe right. It's great for user engagement. But in terms of the human reaction, it gamifies intimacy, which has created a toxic dating environment, right? This sort of an effect AI will not be aware of. So if you are thinking about that why constantly, if you're noticing, or you have to be vigilant about what you're noticing in terms of how people are reacting, what is actually happening in your app? What is the feedback that you're getting, not just quantitatively, but qualitatively over time? And then you might realize you might be optimizing for short-term metrics like user engagement, but maybe what you're doing is killing the dating experience. And in which case, how can you improve the dating experience, right? Focus not just on the short-term metrics, which is a trap we fall into with AI.
Fantastic. I love that. Maybe, can you tell us a story about your kind of most exciting product introduction and if you've had in your career so far, something that really makes your heart sing?
The one product experience that I will share that I really think back to often is a product that I was building for TV ad sales quote generation. Right? There's nothing that sounds less inspiring than TV ad sales quote generation, right? Like imagine this is a product used by people who who are working in sales for TV ad sales, and they want to create quotes for how do you reach this audience for TV advertising. And our product was making that easier for them. So why do I say that this was an inspiring example? Oh, here's another bad element of that job, right? The management in that company did not have a vision. And so working there, like I can't even say that we had a great culture at a leadership level. And yet I think back to that experience as great. So what was so great about it? So my role was I was heading up product and I had a sphere of control. So my leadership team didn't have a great vision, but as we talked to users, I had a clear sense of what is the problem we were solving for them. I had a fantastic engineering counterpart. And we worked together and we had our development team. And the entire development team with me, this head of engineering, we formed our own culture as a team. We had a very clear vision in terms of what we were achieving. And even though it was about TV ad sales, right? What is interesting, and this was a big lesson for me, you don't artificially need a fake vision like, revolutionizing wireless or being the leader in blah, blah, or democratizing justice. You don't need these bullshit fake visions. We used this sort of a very detailed vision approach to answer this question of what is the problem we're solving. We all had that level of clarity and shared purpose that was honest about what is the problem we're solving. And that was inspiring for the team. There was psychological safety in the team. We weren't afraid to talk about mistakes. I remember there was one time where I had asked for a feature and the developer came to me and she said, this is what you wrote in the user story. Here's how you describe the feature. And I think this is a better way of doing it because I think what you really intended is this, right? And I was like, yes, you're absolutely right. A case where she was correcting me in terms of what I had said I wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she had understood the purpose as well as I had, and she could correct
Mm-hmm.
me. And that level of psychological safety that we had across the team. So, despite the lack of vision from the leadership team, despite, not having a great culture across the rest of the organization, what product you're working on, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, you have your sphere of control within which you can create an amazing team, an amazing culture. That team, this was a decade ago. We still keep in touch and have lunch together. Organically, our culture and our thing as a team was to go out and eat spicy food, right? Like when you have a team culture that organically comes together around
Mm-hmm.
something, you stay in touch a decade after, you've built something great. That company was acquired for the product that we built.
Mm-hmm.
And so the results are powerful, not because of because of a great product, because of a great leadership, because of what we achieved.
Yes, yes, that resonates so strongly with me. And I have many stories in my keynotes about one great team that we were building global shared services, which is something that people don't want because people would get laid off and so on. It was, I wouldn't go in many details. I wouldn't go in details now, but we still stick together. It was an
Oh,
amazing team. We finished the 2 years project 3 months earlier. And that was, if we hit this milestone, we go to Tenerife, Canary Islands for a 2 day. It was like planning the next big thing together. But it is amazing. I'm a strong believer of culture and all these virtual power teams methodologies around building a powerful culture, also across the distance, across the cultures, time zones, and so on. What would be your tips? You mentioned already purpose and psychological safety, who is a fundamental, what also Google discovered in their project Aristotle. Can you give us like 1, 2, 3 more tips around building a great team culture that really sticks, deliver the results as you say they're required for the product, and creates a lasting relationships?
yeah. I love your example too. How often does it happen that teams finish a project early, right? Like what you described sounds beautiful.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of tips and my own experience of working virtually, one of the biggest things that I've found is, there's often this mandatory fun of, oh, we do this as a bonding experience. Instead, that genuine bonding comes from a shared purpose. So even a visioning exercise that you do that is honest and aligning around this vision
Mhm.
statement, what I described for that wine startup or even this ad sales team, it was this fill in the blanks sort of a vision statement. And you can align around that as a team. And even that process of alignment, as you do this exercise together, you'll find that you bond as a team because you have this
Mhm.
clarity of vision and what you share as a purpose. The second thing, right, is how do you stay aligned over time? Because I love this proverb. It goes or saying that says, man plans, God laughs. So you might have the best vision, and yet, as you start working, one of the things that happens is, oh, the CEO wants us to do this instead, or here's a new feature the customer is asking for. Oh, if you just add this one custom feature, we'll win this mega deal, right? So how do you deal with those things? One way to stay aligned as a team and this shared purpose is this 2x2 vision versus survival that really keeps you in alignment over time. So let me describe what I mean
Mhm.
by this. When you're making decisions, what you're really doing is balancing long term against short term. You're constantly balancing long term against short term. And the more experience you have as a leader, right, you have this intuition for balancing long term against short term. And which is why, you intuitively tell your team, oh, you're choosing between this and this, we should do this. But your team, often for them, it's like, but why? I'm not sure. And for you, it's obvious. So let's make this long term versus short term obvious and intuitive for our
Mhm.
team. Let's build that intuition. How do you do that? Draw an X and a Y axis. The Y
Mhm.
axis is the vision fit. Is this good for the vision or not? And now I've shared this fill in the blank statement, right? That gives you a detailed approach to vision. Like, is this good for the vision or not? You can look at that fill in the blank statement and now you have an answer. And so that's your y-axis. The x-axis is your short term. Is this good for survival or not? And now when you draw this x and y axis, 4 quadrants emerge. If it's good for the vision and good for survival, those are the easy decisions. But if you're always sticking to the easy decisions, you're still being very myopic. Sometimes you have to invest in the vision. So investing in the vision is where it's good for the vision, but it's not good for short-term survival. So an example of this is, if you're taking on work to refactor code, or let's say, you're investing in your vision to fix technical debt. Maybe it is to do user research. Those are examples where it's not helpful in the short term, but it's important for the long term. So that's investing in the vision. The opposite of that is what I call vision debt. This is where it's great for short-term survival. Maybe it helps you win that big mega $1 million deal, but it's not good for the long-term vision. So this is where you're taking on custom features. Maybe you're taking on technical debt. These are examples of vision debt, right? And now, as a team, especially as a virtual team, when you think about how are we prioritizing, think about how are you balancing what you're doing in your everyday actions across these 4 quadrants. The last quadrant is danger, by the way, which is not good for vision, not good for survival, right? But as you're balancing these quadrants, how are you taking on these features? Even talking about it, even when you're taking on vision debt, like there was a time where, we were a startup, we had to take on vision debt, take on custom features, because to survive, we needed to do that. But even acknowledging that this is vision debt, it bonds the team because you feel like, okay, I know why I'm doing this. That why, you're aligned on the why. So that is another tip for how do you stay aligned and stay together as a virtual team.
Yes, I love that. It's, as I said, nucleus, the gravity center is the vision and the purpose, and having this framework that you just described is great. By the way, while you're talking, when in the previous question, when you said that AI is not a good place to do the user kind of interviews and focus group and using AI-generated persona, one of the previous guests on the podcast, he had a startup where he generates AI persona, but puts a special effort, that's his value add, to make them biased, to make them like human beings. So he would have a special mix of human-related real-life data and biases, and then generating a persona who would behave like a human being. Maybe let's look a little bit. What was your most kind of exciting experience with AI in the product development space? Something that really worked for you, something that maybe users can reuse and repeat. You've been talking about diseases in the product development. Let's focus for a moment on the AI, where AI could add most value, and maybe to ground it with a real life experience of yours.
Yeah, I think the way I think about it, to me, AI gives you speed, but the direction needs to come from you. So when you use AI plus your ability to give direction, then you have speed plus direction, and that gives you velocity. This is how I like to think about it. So what are areas where speed is helpful? To me, speed is where you can generate prototypes really quickly. So I'm going to give you an example of how we've been using it. There's a company that I've been working with in the maritime space. Now, why do I talk about not using AI-generated personas? Whenever you don't have enough data, so I'll give you this example of the maritime industry. I mentioned how I've worked in so many different industries so far. By far, one of the most complicated industries ever that I've come across is this maritime industry. Why? Because it's a tiny industry. People are tech averse. There are many different roles in this industry. And when you have personas like that and an industry that is not mainstream, it is very hard to generate enough data to have people who think in this way. What you discover, what you need to understand is mental models, right? And how people think. So the way you do that is you have to just sort of sit with users. And I'll give you an example. My own learning in this case was we were doing interviews online and we were doing user interviews the right way. I've done user interviews for years, like just decades at this point, right? But and I was doing all the right things in terms of running these online interviews. And here was the huge learning. Moving from online interviews to being in person, it turned out that the user's mental models are completely different because in the online interviews, they were showing us what they're supposed to do. They were showing us how they're supposed to use the product, what their company is telling them they're supposed to do. When I was sitting next to them in person, there was the human factor, because we were all hanging out together. I got to know them a little bit. There was all this chit chat. There was this comfort, right? That I'm sitting right there. And then, real time, something would pop up and I happened to see that. And I was like, oh, wait, what did you just do there? Tell me more. Show me that. Oh, can you share your screen? Show me this part of your screen. There was this psychological safety because of our interactions, and they would show me things, and I realized, oh my God, their mental models are completely different. So going to AI, what was effective is once I understood their mental models, then we could generate prototypes really quickly, right? So what we did was we were using AI to be able to quickly, so the designer created a prototype, and then we would feed that prototype into AI, and the AI would then respond with changes to that UI, saying, oh, this is one way to make the UI better. Here's what we did. For example, it created better contrast, and it turns out this was very valid. In just the users, they're so busy. They have a lot of different inputs. The more inputs and mental cognitive load you have, you need better contrast so that you can work quickly. Otherwise, there's more cognitive load when you don't have contrast. Yes. And so this was great. AI made all those suggestions. So he was able to then take those AI suggestions and incorporate them. The other thing is it created clickable prototypes, which would have taken him so much longer using Figma to try to hook up all of those things. Great. Those were great elements. But then going back to the user and then observing them, the facial expressions, of seeing them, we could not possibly use AI to test those personas. We watched what was easy, what was hard. So those are some ways that we used AI versus human interactions. And the end result was we were able to come up with designs. And what we did was not just maximize short-term metrics, but we were able to really solve the puzzle of what is the problem we're solving. And then we were able to, in solving the puzzle, achieve better business results. So we doubled sales for 2 years in a row, reduced customer churn from 26% to 4%. But it was this combination. That's what gave us velocity.
Absolutely. From Steve Jobs times, innovation teams, designing new products to change the world. He was strong advocate for in-person teams, very tight. What is your take on that? Can product development be done in virtual teams? And if yes, with some caveats, how maybe some teams to make even those intense collaboration teams working well?
Oh, this has been a huge learning experience for me in the last 2 years. Here's what I've found works well and doesn't. When you're only completely virtual, I realized that there just wasn't enough gelling of the team when we were only completely virtual, where we had never gotten together. We had worked for a long time together, but we just weren't getting enough traction and progress. What changed and what worked well? We started doing 2 intense weeks together during the year. And so just twice a year, we would get together and have an intense week of working together. And all of a sudden, it was like a step level function, a step function increase in terms of how well we were working together, how productive it was. So during this 1 week, what worked was it's not just bonding experiences and team bonding and like activities together. We did customer interviews. So we planned for that week together, what we wanted to achieve, what we wanted to explore, test, etc. We then organized customer interviews lined up for every day of that week. We would then have those customer interviews. Then later in the day, we would talk. So, sorry, let me rephrase that. So we would have customer interviews, debrief. What are we going to test the next day? So it's not a design sprint where it's like chill and relaxed, where, you know, one day is thinking about what we're going to design or what problem we're solving. Next day, you sketch ideas. It's not that sort of a process. Imagine that entire 5-day design sprint of ideation, sketching, then testing, prototyping, validating, all of that done in one day, then again, repeat cycle the next day based on learnings. What are you going to adapt the next day? This level of intensity, we did that for 5 days. And that gave us so much fodder for the rest of a few months to work together because we had a shared understanding, a shared purpose to make all of that come alive in our future designs. And then we would repeat the process again in another such intense week. That has been a life-changing experience in terms of how well we've worked together as a team. And now this same team is, you know, like years later, I'm going to think back to exactly how much we've achieved as a team from this virtual experience of working and then coming together for one intense week. This is in the maritime space. I'm going to start talking about it very similarly to that ad sales experience and finding that it's the same level of leveling up as a team, the sense of psychological safety, what we're achieving.
Yes. How big was the team?
This team, so it's about 10 people working together.
Okay, it's a good size. Amazon, they work with the 6 people, 2 pizza team. That's a bit larger, which well done. And the customer interview was online or they were invited the same location?
We were all in the same location, and the customers were online. But I will caveat that there were experiences also in person that we could observe. So that we now had a better understanding of their mental model, so we can both have in-person and online interviews, like balancing the two.
Yes, it is emerging best practice. Because I've done a lot of workshops on virtual power teams and led large teams myself. If you are like fully remote, as you said, fully virtual, having a twice a year on-site, whatever we call it, experience, adds a lot of value. And usually the companies, the bigger companies, not just a team of 10, but like larger companies, some of them 1,000+ people, they would gather once a year, all hands for a week. And then once a year, per department, they gather separately, again for a week. And you found your good denominator with the customer interviews, because that creates a lot of alignment and a lot of discussion and innovation. Usually they would do like the next product development cycle, and they would tackle problems. You know, you have KPIs, you see where the problems, you wouldn't present the results, but tackle problems individually with the attitude, how can I help you? So if somebody in the sales team is struggling with his leads, you know, there will be a discussion, how can we help you? And so on. So it is aligned with what you said, and it could be scaled to a larger organization and still work fine. Last question, maybe just before the last, you mentioned Newcoming is now in the writing. Would you like to share something and how people can find you? Just you shared a lot of pragmatic and hands-on experience, and I feel your passion. So it's pragmatic, you walk your talk. How people can find you and what's coming next?
Yeah, just before I answer this, I love what you said about, the size of the company and how you can scale this. And, just to be clear, the size that I've been of the team itself was 10 people, but the company is about 150 people almost at this point, right? And so exactly what you said, we also scale this in terms of strategy meetings, et cetera, at a leadership level. And depending on sort of what team you're working with, it scales really well as a model to bring people together twice in a year. So going to what I'm working on next. So the book that I'm working on is about why goals and targets don't work. And, we didn't really talk about this at all today. And maybe there's a separate podcast altogether. But one big takeaway, I guess the summary of what I'm working on is goals and targets, they backfire because it creates the wrong mindset in people. Very often, it creates this mindset where people want to show you the positive numbers that show everything is working, that we've hit our KPIs, that we've hit our targets. And this is why Andy Grove at Intel, a long time ago, he said leaders are always the last to know. Why? Because you're not hearing the reality from the trenches. No matter how much you talk about psychological safety, failure, we should embrace it, blah, blah. The reality is when you have goals and targets, people want to show you, ta-da, I've hit those numbers. What they're not doing is playing detective on the bad numbers. The bad numbers are where the opportunities lie, where if they just looked at that as a puzzle and said, oh, what's happening there? What could we do? Is that a problem? Is that an opportunity? Just playing detective on the bad numbers is where you can find new business opportunities and grow business. So my next book is about how do we shift from this mindset of goal setting to one of puzzle setting and puzzle solving. But maybe that's another whole different topic.
Yes.
And in terms of where to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn. And if you're welcome to reach out to me to share more about radical product thinking and how you're thinking about vision and what you've learned as you read this book, things that you're applying, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. You can also ask me about corporate workshops and training or consulting for the team. And lastly, you can also find the Radical Product Thinking book. It's on Amazon and bookstores around you.
Excellent. Thank you. And the last question, it's like a standard one. So take your crystal ball. And where do you see and you've been advocating for, start, guide the AI, and then it could give you velocity, to put it in a very simple way. But where do you think is the ultimate frontier of AI?
Oh, my take on this is, if we can do this right, and I'm going to answer this with optimism, if we can do this right, if we are thoughtful about the change that we want to create in the world, then AI can help us create a better society. So my hope is that by taking this Jedi-like approach, we can use AI to be thoughtful and create the right sort of change and accelerate that sort of change for people. And we can learn how to make the world a better place by constantly using this velocity to iterate and to experiment, learn, and adapt, right? I think that experimentation, learning, adaptation is really important.
Excellent. Radhika, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for all the insights on your contagious energy, and I wish you all the best on your journey.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.